What's going on, everybody? Aaron Trefini here, back with two wonderful guests today down here in the beautiful state of Texas, coming to you from Houston. And we have Ryan and Skylar Dodson. How are y'all doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I can't complain. I've been looking forward to it, for a number of reasons for our conversation. And one of them is that, I know that you guys wear a few different hats. You guys do a lot of different things. So for those of us who aren't too familiar with you, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ryan Dodson. I'm the director of finance for the Wonder Investment Group. We're an investment group that focuses on strengthening communities one door at a time. And some of our services that we offer, we offer a ton of different help with investors, whether they're just starting out or the more seasoned investor. My focus for our group is on really the debt and the capital raising side. So whether we're doing a joint venture with you or we're providing the funding for your project, my job is to ensure that I can bring the deal to the closing table and more importantly, that you're going to realize the return on your investment, right? So that's generally where my verticals fall. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's and Skylar, I'm curious, how are you guys kind of working together on a lot of these deals in terms of, y'all's different roles?
Yeah, so part of like what Ryan does is he does a lot of the financing portions. So he procures funds, gets kind of like in the creative finance side of things, looking at each deal and analyzing each particular exit. And then what I'll do is I'll look at that particular market, whatever trends are going on there, anything from sales volume, population growth, fair market rents, and so on. And then just look at, specific details as far as what the most feasible strategy would be for that particular investment. Anything from, if there's a really big margin, maybe wholesaling is an option that could be entertained. Could also be a fix and flip or a long-term hold, just whatever's more feasible or whatever's best fit in that market at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a cool partnership, kind of having, two people doing different roles. And, obviously, it's crazy to me just in real estate, how many different hands are kind of touching this deal, right? I mean, you have, the financing, right? And what I think is interesting about financing is that maybe you look at a property, it could be a home, it could be a multi-million-dollar apartment complex. A lot of people just see the property. You don't think about the capital behind it. So, if you wouldn't mind, could you kind of talk about how it would work raising that money or raising that capital for your projects?
Yeah, sure. So, to go back to, Sky and I, we've, obviously being brothers and all, we used to get rowdy with each other when we were kids, but when we grew up, we started to realize we actually make a pretty good partnership. And going back to what you were saying about the financing and such and how the capital is. So what makes us a little bit more unique and what makes our clients use us time and time again is because we underwrite everything, meaning we underwrite the intake of the opportunity, the exit. We underwrite, what the loan looks like when we're selling the loan to either a back-end investor or what we're doing in terms of, the performance of that loan. So what makes us a little different is we look at it from pretty much all angles. The general process, especially if nobody's really familiar with how hard money works, generally, you have the deal that gets presented, a closing happens, right? And then the funds get dispersed from the hard money lender. Well, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. And so when we're either brokering that opportunity or lending that opportunity out, either in-house or whatever have you, we have to make sure that that loan is 100% secured, meaning that the asset is well underwritten. The deal has a great exit. The borrower is a great borrower, right? There's all these wonderful things that we're looking at because the end investor which is the one who's putting the money in the back end there, that's wanting a return, needs to ensure that that is going to be as successful as possible. So we do a lot of the things that I don't think a lot of lenders in the space do on the front end of a deal to ensure that it does it appeases the investor, so they'll continue to wanting to use us for originating the loans, right? But also that the borrower's put in a very, very healthy position. And some of the cool things that have happened, because obviously, Aaron, you're familiar, we're not shifting. It has shifted as far as the market goes. A lot of our clients are very thankful for what we've done because of how we've underwritten those deals and how we've structured them. Because in the middle of a shift, right, a lot of investors are going to lose thousands and thousands of dollars because maybe they didn't have a partner like us that looked at the deal from front to back and looked at it from all angles so they can easily pitch the exit. Thankfully for us, when we did that, we've helped investors make really solid decisions. And now we're getting phone calls that are saying, thank you so much. We really appreciate the way you did this. We didn't really think about it on the front end, right? But now that this has happened, we're very thankful. So that makes us a little bit different in terms of how that is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's so neat. And, I didn't mean to kind of get into the capital raising and the debt side too fast. Maybe to kind of rewind a little bit, just so our audience can, kind of know a bit more about y'all. Can you describe maybe, where you grew up? And did you see yourself kind of working in the real estate business coming up, or?
It's interesting. And Sky, if you want to touch on a little bit, kind of our background and how everything kind of arrived at where we're at, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So I know, like, growing up, like, you always heard about real estate, right? And how that's kind of like the end goal, or maybe not necessarily the end goal, but that's ultimately going to be the route that you want to go to obtain wealth. For us, we grew up in kind of like a upper middle class household out in Littleton, Colorado. And we actually ran into a very unfortunate event where, when the housing crash happened back in 07, 08, we actually ended up losing our childhood home as a result of that. And going into high school is a little bit of an adjustment, moving into, kind of like a closed space apartment, much more different, cost of living, it was much more exorbitant for us because our father had recently been laid off from work. And it was a big change up from the way that life was previous to that. And so for us, we wanted to figure out ways that we could get back to, that quality of life that we were at previously, as well as help other people, that would be in that position. That way they wouldn't have to go through what we went through, because this happened back in 07, 08 timeframe. And it took our father roughly about 10 years to get back to where he was able to qualify for home ownership again. And 10 years is a very long time. So anything that we can do to help avoid having that happen for other families, that's part of our main mission. So.
Yeah. And yeah, I find that so interesting as well, kind of, your experiences as a child, whether they're good or bad, they're very formative, right? During those very formative years. And I'm curious as well, I'm sure maybe your outlook on money has changed a little bit. Could you kind of explain maybe what your idea of money was back then, and then maybe how it's changed to where y'all are now?
I don't know, Sky, if you want to touch on this, but we grew up in a household, alluding, to what was discussed earlier. Financial literacy was not really, we didn't even really know what financial literacy was, right? So through that trauma, which is we formed this company out of, we really doubled down on our research to really understand, what money is, what can money do for you, and the whole mentality behind what is money, right? And we have to look at it from a standpoint of, it's just simply a tool, it's a resource, and there's no emotional attachment. And I don't want to speak for Skylar, but for me, I've completely detached myself from the emotional aspect of money, right? So whether I have $2 or $3 million that's available for me to use to put into a deal or buy something, that I don't get any of those fuzzy feelings, right? I detached emotional feelings from money, which allows you to take more of a real objective look. But that comes through education, right? So some of the books that we've read and some of the mentors that we have in our stable, it helps to reshape that. I don't know if you want to give some context on that, Sky, or not.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like growing up, like, I think about like when I was a kid, I used to own my own business. I had a lawn mowing business actually when I was in 7th and 8th grade. I remember anytime that paycheck would come in, we'd end up going, watching movies with friends, going to restaurants, just basically taking that income and then just blowing it on whatever and not really planning for something. And then what you actually come to learn is that money is actually a key. If you think about it like doors, right? Or almost think of it as kind of like Super Mario, right? Like Mario in 64, how you get so many stars and then you can open up the next door, right? And then you get more stars and then that allows you to open up another door. That's the same way that money works. I mean, you got to think of it as like, okay, as soon as I accumulate, say, $1,000, how can I maximize that $1,000 to get me to $5,000? And then once I get 5,000, how do I get to 10? And then how do I get to 20, 50, and 100? And then so on and so forth. And the main thing that Robert Kiyosaki talks about is making sure that you put your money into assets and avoid liabilities. Because that's the main problem right now is a lot of people, they're taking that residual income from their paycheck each week, month, however often they get paid, and then they're spending that money on liabilities as opposed to assets that are going to create additional cash flow. Almost kind of related to like a vegetable garden, for instance, right? Well, each dollar that you have is essentially like a seed that you can use to build a tomato plant or broccoli, whatever, whatever that you're growing at that time, right? And you want to figure out, okay, how do I get more tomatoes? How do I get more oranges? So that way I have, a never ending supply of oranges, because eventually, I mean, if you just take money, you throw it in the bank and don't put it to work for you, I mean, there's going to be a cap on that. And eventually your money is going to go down and then you never actually excel or go forward from there. So that was the main thing that kind of shifted my perspective, is looking at money as, how can I best maximize, the money that I have available to me to get myself to the next level. I think the main thing also is, setting a goal, and obviously putting effort towards, small steps to obtain that goal. So.
Absolutely. And I love that picture that you painted, really talking about, kind of planting those seeds, right? Every dollar you have, you're basically kind of, reinvesting in it and, planting something that can bear fruit. And, for a lot of people, the mindset that both of y'all just described right now, that can be very difficult to develop, right? You get, it can be hard to detach yourself from money. You think, oh my gosh, if you only knew what I went through to get X amount of dollars, and oh, well, I have this to handle and whatever it is. How would you suggest someone to kind of improve that money mindset that you guys are talking about?
I think it goes back to what Skylar said. You just have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail, right? So the main thing is really focus on building a plan. So write down your goals. I mean, what I do and what I've done for our company is we write down the goals, right? Write down what you want to achieve. Start big, dream big, right? And then what you want to do is focus on drawing the map of how to get that goal and break it down in chunks. I mean, there was a book that we read when we were kids. It was Who Moved My Cheese? You remember that book, Sky? You just take little bites of the cheese mountain, right? And when you dream really big, right, you're going to bite little pieces and it's much more easy. It's easier to manage. So I would start big goal, then put together a plan, and then try and break down, right? So you're doing, yearly tasks to monthly tasks to weekly tasks to daily tasks. and include, right, education on money as being a part of that foundation. Because when you spend a quarter, a half a year, an entire year studying money and the habits of really successful and wealthy people, your mindset will start to shift, and you'll start to understand, and everything will start to click. Going back to that, there are two very important resources on this planet. One is obviously money, because you need to be able to have money to do things. You need to have money to buy people, to buy time, right? So hire employees, right? You need money to make other money so you can use that money for other things, but also time, right? Time's a very, very valuable resource that I think a lot of us take for granted. And you have to be able to figure out the balance between money and time and how to make those two things work together. And so it's kind of funny. When I started to realize this, I would go into the grocery store and then like I'd go look at like the sugary donuts and all that stuff. And I look at it and said, oh my goodness, my mind starts seeing that these are like little time, little ticking things, right? So if I eat those donuts, I'm going to decrease my time, right? If I go to Target and I find, like a video game machine or something like that, that's, these are time sucks, right? They take your time. So when you start to realize that, in my opinion, it kind of takes away the emotion, like I talked about. And then you start to be really focused on bringing people in your circle that are really important to help you get to your goal. And then you start being really focused on using your time and your money as a resource. But it all starts with, in my opinion, what we did is what's that big goal that you want to achieve? And then drill down and then focus on financial literacy as the basis for why we're making our decisions to get to that end goal. So.
Yeah, I love it. And that's some great insight there, right? Because it's easy to kind of, turn on social media and kind of see all these, all these pictures and all these, big, I guess, big things that people are doing, but you don't really break it down to, hey, this is what I need to do on a daily basis to be able to get into that position.
Sure. It's very easy to get caught up in when you social media, right? And you see everybody with all the Lambos and all the fancy cars and stuff. And then you start getting into that rat trap of just comparing yourself to others, when in reality, like, you're really in competition with yourself. Like, are you a better version of the person you were yesterday? Right. And what you'll find is if you do that consistently, for every 30, 60, 90 days, go into every year, right? And then you look back in 5 years, you're going to be very amazed at what type of person you have become, and then also what you have achieved. So.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to be said for that as well. And I'm curious, maybe before starting this company and kind of embarking on this new journey for y'all, if you wouldn't mind, could you describe maybe how you got into this side of the business, and out of anything in real estate, why this part of the business?
Yeah, sure. As far as the financing side, so my background, I was in the automotive industry, and I left the automotive industry just because there were some there were consistent situations that I was being placed in, even in executive management, where I just didn't feel comfortable, and it was kind of it was pressing on my moral compass a bit. And so and also with having an entrepreneurial mindset, working for somebody else just didn't jive. So I left that. But my background is in finances, right? And so being in the finance position in the car business, is able to take those skills, those sales skills, and be able to really drive that into something more niche. I actually jumped into really the private money brokering business and brokering money for projects, right? I mean, if somebody had a project, I'd look at it, underwrite it as if it was a car deal, and then go and find a lender that would be willing to lend on it because of the way that I underwrote it. So, and I was doing stuff that was, business loans. I helped a bar. Actually, one of my first loans that I brokered was a barbecue business. This guy needed $50K to start up his business for barbecue sauce. And so we got him hooked up, but the way I underwrote it and everything else, I got a lender involved, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then that really, really opened up my eyes, because it's like, I can take the skills that I've learned, right, and be able to compound them, right, and really focus on diving into the money thing a little bit more. I think in order for you to be successful in any business, you have to know how the finances work. I say that time and time again. If you don't know how the finances work, and you don't have to be an expert by any means, but if you don't understand the basics of the finances, right, how loans work, right, how capital raising works, right, what equity is, what depreciation is, right, what cash flow is. If you don't understand these basic, fundamental principles of money itself, it's going to be really, really hard, to really grasp what you're going to be doing in terms of this. So if that helps answer the question.
Yeah, no, and that's a great explanation there, a bit about, kind of you getting into the business. And I can really see how a lot of your experience on the automotive side, of course, with finance can really transition you to where y'all are at now. And I know you kind of spoken about it a bit before, earlier on the show, but could you describe, maybe some of the markets you're in and, different types of deals that you're looking to work on?
Yeah, sure. So, again, the relationships that the Wonder Investment Group have built with, a lot of the lenders that we utilize, even in-house, with some of our underwriting, like we have a pretty stacked program. And the reason why we have a stacked program is based off the fact that we underwrite everything on the front, right? Like going back to what I was saying, the deal structure that we submit in when we go and get a client funded, or when we do a deal ourselves, of course, is thoroughly thought of, right? All the way through from the very beginning to the multiple exits that the deal may experience, right? And that confidence, that vote of confidence has created a very strong relationship. So, our three core principles is we want to be transparent, right? So when we deal with a client, we're always going to be 100% transparent with you, give you the good news with the bad, right? And then figure out a solution, right, that makes sense. We're going to be giving you all the information so you can make a great decision. We're going to have quality funding relationships, quality relationships with joint ventureship, quality relationships with underwriting like Sky and his team. So that way you can make the best decision again, right? Being transparent in that process. And then of course, the flexibility aspect, for instance, I have a client right now that's trying to do a takeout loan, which a takeout loan is they've already done the project. It's already stable. It's on a bridge loan. So a bridge is a very finite period of time, and they need to be able to refinance the debt into a more of a long-term vehicle, right? So like a 30-year fixed or something of that nature, to take out the bridge loan. And unfortunately, he used a lot of his credit cards and a lot of these other vehicles that we don't necessarily suggest to use, right? Which caused him a position to where it's holding him back from getting out of that bridge loan. So again, going back to the flexibility aspect of one of our core principles, we're able to actually pair him up with a credit partner that would be interested in maybe jumping on with him to help him get out of this particular situation, and both parties will benefit. So those are the three things that we really focus on when we're taking on. We also know that real estate itself is very multidimensional. And it's very relationship based. So you can provide a tremendous amount of assistance and a lot of value by all the different aspects that real estate provides. And so that's where, our company has stepped in, because alluding to what Skylar said, if somebody like us came to us when we were kids and helped my dad in his situation, who knows, probably would have kept the house. You never would have known, but through that trauma we learned, and we want to do better, right? We want to do better as we continue down this journey. So
absolutely. And there's a lot to be said for that as well. And I think it's great how you can kind of, like you said, really help people like that, especially kind of in that bridge situation where he's looking to, or whatever sort of issue he may have had with his debt to income or whatever, exactly what the problem was. But I guess maybe just kind of big picture here, when you're evaluating or underwriting deals, could you maybe explain what makes a quote unquote good deal?
Oh yeah, sure. Sky, do you want to touch on just the basic core metrics that we use? Because and Aaron, real quick. So what Skylar does, he handles a lot of our pre-underwriting too. So certain deals have to meet certain metrics. So and if it does, then we can talk about to the next step. But go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, so anytime that you look at a deal, I mean, the first thing that you want to look at, obviously, is what is my purchase price? That's going to be the very first thing you're going to know right off the bat, okay? Next thing you want to look at is what is the cost going to be to fix up the property? Typically, as a general rule of thumb, going into it, not even without even seeing the property, good rule of thumb would probably be about $30 per square foot. So say that home is 1,500 square feet. I'm going to go into that project assuming that it's probably going to be roughly 40 to 45K. And that number could fluctuate. I may walk in there and it may be in very good shape. And then that's a very conservative number then. And then I can go down to probably, 30, 25, maybe even less than that, depending on the home, right? Or you may go in there and, you got ceiling panels that are hanging down, you got holes in every wall, you got a bunch of stuff, all in the hallways, so you have a bunch of stuff that needs to get removed, which, could lead to other issues. Like maybe you get stuff removed and there's a foundation problem. Well, right then I know that my rehab budget is going to probably be like 80, 90, probably even over $100,000. So you want to go in, look at what the purchase price is, what's the cost to get it fixed up, and then what is the after repair value, or the ARV. And the way that you want to determine that is you want to look at other homes that are in that same area. I recommend, the same zip code, or at least within 2 miles of where your subject property is. That's a pretty good, rough radius to go off of, okay? You want to look at what homes are selling for in the area, and then look at where your home falls in line with those other homes. Like I'll give you a for instance, okay? Like say that you have a property, much older one that's built from, I don't know, 1940, 1945, right? But then you go and you look at your comparative market analysis, or your CMA, which is going to be other homes that have sold that are like your property. And you may come to find out that what is actually selling in the area are new builds. Like especially out here in Northwest Arkansas, there's a huge market right now for new builds. So I would be pretty apprehensive going in and taking on an older property for that reason, because there's a higher demand for new builds. So you got to know what your market is and what's actually selling out there. I mean, think about it as kind of like an ice cream store, right? You go in there and, maybe a lot of patrons are coming in and they want to get vanilla ice cream, right? So they may not want strawberry, they may not want pistachio. So you want to make sure that your home is a vanilla ice cream cone. That makes sense, right? And then as far as like actual metrics go, for a general rule of thumb, so say that you've gone through your calculations and you've determined, okay, my home's probably going to sell for roughly 200,000. Ideally, you want your purchase price to be about between 40% to 50% of whatever your after repair value is. And that's going to ensure that you have adequate margin. A good rule of thumb would be, if it's going to be a fix and flip, you want to do for your max offer, it's going to be 70% of what the after repair value is minus your rehab costs. So say in this case, after repair value is 200,000, right? And maybe you've determined, okay, this is going to be about a 40K rehab, okay? So 200K minus 40K brings us down to 160K. And then you want to find out, okay, 70% of 200K, I got mixed up there, okay? So 70% of 200K is going to put us at roughly 140K to 150K. And then you want to subtract your rehab costs from that. So that means that my max offer on that home is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 90,000 to 100,000. So it comes out to be about 50% loan to value, or LTV. Those are just some general rule of thumbs. And again, that's assuming that the home is in pretty rough shape. The nicer the home, the more accommodations that you can make them. So you may be able to make a higher offer than at that point. But that's typically what we do. We look at, okay, 70% of ARV minus rehab, and that's going to be our max offer.
Absolutely. And that's some great insight there, because, whether you're, a newbie investor looking to do a deal for the first time, or, a seasoned veteran who's done quite a bit of deals, I guess the big question always is, what are the lender's requirements, right? What do I have to do to be able to make this deal happen? And I don't know if I would exactly call it red flags, but are there any things that people should be aware of when they're going to present a potential deal to get financing?
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of investors will want to know, I want to have the most amount of leverage, right? I want to make sure that I can put the least amount of money down. So going back to what Skylar was saying, right? If you follow those metrics and you find a deal that fits within that box, there's a very good chance that you're going to be getting the maximum leverage that's available from a lender. So if you are relatively new in the game, right? Generally, there's 3 pieces of criteria that a lender is going to be looking at. So they're going to be looking at what's it worth when it's done and fixed up, right? What's the rehab costs? And then, of course, what does it cost to purchase the actual asset? And then all of those have different ratios that, depending on your experience as a borrower and an investor, and depending on the market, right, of where the asset's located, and depending on the appetite of the conditions in the economy that we're dealing with, right, that's going to determine your leverage. So for instance, the market that we were dealing with pre-shift, where interest rates were super low, dispositions of those properties via sale from like a realtor, right, the exit strategy for selling was really high. So lenders were okay, hard money lenders like myself were okay with giving more leverage, being more flexible. Now that market's shifted, you're going to see that start to drift. So generally speaking, if you're in the finance, those are the 3 things. 75% of after repair value is that first key point. So if you can fit your acquisition and your rehab within 75%, you're probably going to be you're going to be in a good, healthy zone in terms of how much money you have to come up out of pocket. So, but generally, for a really, really good deal, and you have decent experience, most lenders will be at 90% of purchase. So 10% down, 100% of your rehab, right? And that will be up to 75% of the actual asset when it's finished and stabilized. So, but if you find a good deal, like what Sky suggested, you'll be able to find a hard money lender, a lender of sorts that will be able to give you a lot of leverage where you can put very minimal money down. And then what I also suggest is, and I tell people this too, is when you're speaking to a lender, right? Ask really, really good questions. Okay. Ask them how long they've been in business. Ask them how much dollar amount in loans have they done in the last year. Ask them that question. And then ask them, do they have any benefits for repeat borrowers? Meaning, if you build a relationship with that lender, are they going to give you more leverage? Are they going to decrease, the points and the interest, right, for you using them continually? Ask these questions as you build out, who you want to get funding from, because it's important when you're doing this that you have a go-to plan when you get that deal. So, and then of course, what we're talking about there is more of the short-term financing. So, the fix and flip model, generally speaking, if you're looking long-term, so maybe you buy and hold investor, maybe you find a property that doesn't need a whole lot of work. It's got a tenant in there and you just want to buy a cash flowing asset. Generally you're going to be at about, 80% loan to cost or whatever you're buying it for. You'd be getting a loan for around 80% or so. And some of the products like we offer on the long-term side, one of the most important factors that we factor back here when we underwrite is what's called debt service constraint ratio. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to basically summarize it as simple as possible. It basically, you take your rents divided by the mortgage payment, and then there's a ratio there. If you take your rents and your mortgage payment is higher than your rents, well, you're not making any money and the lender is going to look at that and not want to lend money on that asset. But if the rents, are higher than your mortgage payment, then you've got that thing we call cash flow. And that's what those lenders are looking for, is what's the cash flow. And if you have a really good cash flow in a really good market at a really good price, you're going to have almost 100% certainty you're going to get that deal funded. So.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those things. Anytime someone throws out an acronym or, DSCR or whatever it is, sometimes that can cause a lot of confusion for people, but that's very helpful to kind of see that, it's really just a ratio to not only to show the investor, where they stand in the deal, but also to show the lender, hey, is this worth our time, to fund this deal or not? Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lenders, they care about their investors that, they deploy their capital with. They want to make sure that they're making good, solid decisions. So for us, we get to be the middle guy in that relationship and ensure that the lender's happy, but also that you're happy too. And so we want to make sure we underwrite every deal thoroughly to ensure that both parties are successful. But it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of opportunity coming. I think we all know that. And if, I know that hard money's always had like that icky stigma to it. You always picture like I call him like the Leo mobster with a cigar in his mouth. Like you always kind of picture that. But I mean, it's an awesome tool. And when used appropriately, it can help you scale and help you do a lot of deals. But the key to that though, is you got to have somebody that understands what that is. That's part of your team, or you got to go out and do the research and figure it out and be very solid on what it is. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I'm blessed to be a part of it. I'm blessed to help out as many clients as we have, and looking forward to the future. So
yeah, I love it. I love to hear it. And I'm curious as well, now that you kind of mentioned, I know you briefly kind of mentioned the economy, right? And it's funny. I was having a conversation with the developer here in Texas as well. And it's kind of interesting, the little shift that we're seeing, not only across Texas, but really just nationwide, right? Do you think that it's also affecting the capital market to where, do you think that lenders are kind of pulling back a bit and saying, we're not going to fund as many deals or be more particular with underwriting, or kind of what are you seeing right now?
Well, I can tell you this, there's no shortage of capital. I mean, these lenders, they only make money if they lend out the capital to the deals, right? So what we are seeing is a constraint on deal flow. So if you kind of look at it that way, kind of alluding to what I talked about earlier, the market is shifting. The lenders are going to be shifting along with it, right? I mean, you've got a lot of individuals that are, that we talk to on the daily that are constantly viewing the market, constantly looking and seeing what the Feds are doing, and then they're putting themselves in a position to basically get ahead of that. So I wouldn't say that lenders are necessarily holding back from lending out on loans and lending out on assets. I would say that they're going to be reducing leverage because they want to be more conservative. And this is coming from a group where we make money obviously by lending out capital. It goes back to you. I think you really got to be focused on the creative financing aspect right now in this market. If you have cash, right, tied up in a property, let's say you have equity in your house, I would highly recommend that you figure out a way to tap into that. With a coming recession, a lot of millionaires are going to be made. Every single recession, there's been a lot of millionaires that have been made coming out of it. And how they were able to be millionaires was taking the opportunities that were provided to them. And how those opportunities arrive is really, it comes from divorce, disaster. It comes from disease, right? Areas that are distressed. And, when you look at it, there's a lot of people that are going to be hurting because, they didn't, again, plan financially well. So, these lenders understand what's coming. They've adjusted, and they are adjusting constantly. But the deal flow will be coming, right? It's just got to wait for it to catch up. And so if you've got money in a house, you got money in a 401k, you've got money laying around, in terms of equity, I highly recommend that you find some way to tap into that and be ready to catch, because it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a really interesting time that we're in. It's hard to tell what's going to happen. I don't know. It's just that there's so many different things out there. It seems like everyone kind of has their own take, but the recurring theme that we're seeing here is, hey, if you have cash, you want to utilize it in good times and in bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things, just, you gotta be able to take advantage of the deal flow that comes through. A lot of people are going to make emotional decisions, either because they ignorance or such, whatever, right? Emotion happens. We're human beings.
Sure.
So you got to be able to just be creative, solve those problems, but have the available liquidity, to be able to take advantage of that. But like you said, Aaron, I mean, you're right on the money with that. So, I mean, here it's going to be very, very imperative, in my opinion. So,
yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely some great insight on the lending side. And, is there anything that you haven't said you'd really just like to hit home? I mean, how can our audience, really connect with you guys, or what are y'all looking for?
No, I mean, well, first off, we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Aaron, and speak with your audience and really tell our story. I hope that those that have watched this have really got a feel for who we are as people. I tell people all the time, in the lending seat, we're investors first, lenders second. We focus on the returns on investment before we focus on the actual compensation for services. And we're looking, like I said, to build relationships with people. There's a lot of great individuals and great people that are not in the real estate space, that haven't got into it, that they don't realize the amount of talent that they really truly do have. And so for those that may be watching this that don't know, right, the step to take as far as, how do I get my first deal, right? What should I be doing to prepare for my first deal? I urge you, you can contact us. We'd be happy to sit down and kind of dive into that and help you. And even if you're seasoned, let's look at your portfolio and let's see what opportunities that you have and how we can structure for the oncoming winter, we call it, right? But we have a really, really strong team. Our family of companies that we have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas. I mean, we don't just have real estate that we deal with. We have mergers and acquisitions and business acquisitions that we deal with too. So we're a very well-rounded investment group. And we're very, very people driven. So, if that's something that rings true to you guys, definitely contact us. We have our website, which is www.wonderinvestmentgroup.com. There you'll be able to see a little bit about us and what we do, some of the deal flow that we funded. And then obviously, our lending arm as well, is Ace Dreadlow. It kind of an interesting name. When you hear it's like, what is that, right? But if you actually take the acronym of ACED, which means appreciation, cash flow, equity, and depreciation, and then red low means to stay out of the red. That's kind of how that name came about. So it's a little bit of a hidden meaning within the words. But if you go to acedreadlow.com, that's our funding arm. And there you'll see the instructions to basically, if you want to submit an application with us, so we can look at your deal and help you fund it. But yeah, I mean, that's us. I wouldn't have been able to do it without this man right here, Skylar. I mean, he is the brains behind the research that we've developed and the insight in how we actually move our deal flow. So without him and his team, it would have been really difficult. So, but yeah, we're here to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a heck of a team. It's been great to kind of getting to know y'all a bit about, your story, your background, kind of your journey from, the automotive side of the business and really honing those finance skills into helping people, on the lending side and really giving some great insight, both of y'all, Ryan and Skylar, great insight on, what makes a great deal. And, it's been a pleasure, and thank y'all for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll talk to you later.